in terms of the storytelling choices that I make. And I think it's interesting that you were saying that um, just like your singular voice can be irrelevant, but I've been really finding it to be even more relevant now because I'm like, there's this multiplicity that exists in all of our identities and tradition. Also, there's a multiplicity to that because we're creating tradition just as much as we're living it out. So I think that's kind of what I was exploring with notions of identity and looking at the way these artists were approaching the work.
Okay, let me fix this. Hold on. All right. No, thank you. Can you hold that for me? Super.
I feel like I'm on the metro. So what's your hot take? Yeah.
All right. I'm okay.
Okay. Well, I guess they can let us know if this is working now. Okay, so fortune telling. That was more about really a reflection on like my own curatorial practice and this not being the first project in which I've been asked about the future. I've been asked about the future of craft many times, and the Burke Prize at some point. That was like the tagline also. So it's a word that's come up often in my practice. But I think what it really comes down to is that artists and curators and everybody who makes up the artistic ecosystem, we are culture makers. So we do end up deciding what the future looks like. And so by observing what's going on right now, we get glimpses into what the future can be. But actually, I think the words that you pulled out for Zinzi and for Anya are also very relevant for my picks also with Christy and Michelle. Like those are two words that come up with their practice. And I specifically picked them. I think Christy, you could see the futurism just on the work, right? But it's also about community and collaboration, which we were doing as well throughout this project, and activism. And in Michelle, I'm so fascinated by the sort of the transitional period that you're going through in like just expanding your practice. And I think that's like such an exciting way to look at the future, very specifically like your future, but also like what that can mean for other people who like maybe have been working with the medium in a very specific way for a very long time and then at any moment can change and do something different. And so it's like always in flux in that way.
I think about how for me, when I came up as a curator, it was very much the time of NAGPRA, so the Native American Graves Protection Repatriation Act. And so where I work, it's an Indigenous museum that represents Indigenous people from the Arctic Circle all the way down to Tierra del Fuego. So there's no way that as a curator, I can speak for the Lenca of El Salvador or the Maya or the Hupa or anyone. So in the way that I handle being a curator, it's always through working with Indigenous nations that I'm working with and artists. And so that's why for me with storytelling, I kind of view me as a curator as I'm just the liaison between the museum and the artist. And so I don't really think about me as an authority at all. It's more of how can I sort of help with the artist speaking and the artist telling their stories and their voices and who they are. So that's how I kind of view my curatorial work. It's really, I'm just trying to provide space for those artists to talk. And I'm just facilitating that however I can.
And I would just add too to that facilitation that as a curator, one of my, and I think all of you too think about this, I think about the audience a lot. When I was deciding what I wanted to do with my art history degree, and I decided I didn't want to be an art history professor, it was because I didn't want to preach to the choir. I wanted to talk to regular people and help them have really meaningful experiences with art. So in that role as a go-between between the artists and the museum, we're also the go-between for the artists and the audiences. And when we're talking about collaboration, you know, that we're all trying to kind of remember that as well, right? And here at the Clay Studio, we have our exhibition council, who we met with a few times during this process as well, to just sort of hear what they were thinking about the exhibition, the artists. You know, the council doesn't curate anything, they don't make any decisions, but we hear their feedback, and sometimes it's really surprising, sometimes it's kind of hard to hear, but it also is a good reminder that we're all inside the art world, and that isn't always, I mean, there's most of the people who come visit the exhibitions aren't coming from that place, so it's really important for us to take that into consideration. I was thinking today about tension between various things. When Michelle was talking about moving from, you know, on the plane between countries, when Cesar was talking about, it was a lot about identity, like being between cultures. Almost everybody in the show kind of had some kind of experience with that. And I think that's really reflective in the material. And it's also really reflective of the idea of trying to figure out the future. We're in this moment where we want to know what's going to happen next. And I'd love to hear each of you maybe talk about either one of your artists and how you see the tension in their work with these kind of, you know, either or situations or transitions between places, or maybe in Clay itself. So who would like to, is that too hard of a question? And there we go, got it.
No, well, something that I think has been really interesting is that, so I'm 49, right? So I've been doing this for a while. And back in the day, the National Museum of the American Indian was the place where Native artists could have shows. And now I see art museums now wanting to involve Native artists. So that is really wonderful. So really love it. But sometimes I see it as kind of a one-off show. And, or, you know, maybe a museum will learn like, oh, I'm on Lenape land, so I better have a Lenape artist in here. And so that's, I will say for me, a tension that I struggle with is that I really appreciate all these museums wanting to include Indigenous artists, but I really want them to also understand that they need to do some education themselves. And you also have to really have so much, you really need to treat these artists with respect and sort of, and so when I think about tension, you know, I'll just like say Holly Wilson's art, for example. I see so many people now in the area just want to have Lenape artists, want to have a Lenape show. And so that's their kind of thing of like, oh, we did something for the original people of this area. And, you know, I really want them to sort of understand artists like Holly, where there was this very horrible diaspora that happened. And so when she's saying that there are now Lenape in Oklahoma and Wisconsin and Canada, that was not just, oh, we're just going to leave because we want to. Like there was a lot of horrible things that happened that really sort of pushed so many Lenape out. And then even today, dealing with, you know, who can be Lenape today. So people in New Jersey or people in Pennsylvania, you know, versus people from other places. And so, you know, I really want people to sort of also understand that an artist like Holly Wilson, like it's not just for you to just sort of say you had a Lenape artist and you've done it for your region. It's like, I really hope that people really understand what she's saying and what she's saying through her art. And so I'm really sort of so happy that she was able to do a presentation today where you got to see more of her art. So you really kind of understand, you know, who she is in this trajectory of being a Lenape, living in Oklahoma, and also sort of like everything that she's kind of like speaking through her art. So that is like just one sort of the thing of tension that I sort of see, but I also just want people to just really be open to understanding so much of these indigenous histories are not just for the one-off. So these artists should be incorporated in anything that you do, not just because you just want to sort of say that you've done it.
Yeah, I feel like that about craft too. I think it's very trendy right now, and a lot of people are just kind of deciding to do it just kind of for the sake of it. But I think both the artists I work with embody a tension that like I've been exploring for a while now, what I call the aesthetics of optimism, which is aesthetically the work is very joyful, and I think it's something that they're interested in bringing into their practice. But once they're talking about what the work is about or what kind of brought the desire to create the work, there's a lot more to it, and it's not always going to be happy feelings. There's some very sort of integral moments to shaping identity that have affected like the way that they've grown up and the way that they see themselves now. And like I think I personally identify with that. Like I'm an in-betweener. Like I, coming from Puerto Rico and then living in the States now more than I lived in Puerto Rico. But yeah, it took me a while to like get back to myself after moving to the States. So, but I feel like I also express myself in a very sort of aesthetically optimistic way. So I think there's something really powerful to that tension, to being able to kind of coexist in the duality of like happy, sad, or just like I don't yeah, just having that.
Oh wow. Yeah, I mean, I think both artists that I got to work with they both present tension in different ways, and they both do it so subtly, and I think it's really beautiful. Morel really presents this conversation around like our impact on the environment and the implications of just our presence as humans. And I think it's really beautiful too, because although um, you know, especially with what you were saying, Angelica, the trendiness of some of these things, right? Of craft and like right now of Black contemporary artists. Um, the fact that these are the topics that these artists choose to focus on and how they like transcend a lot of like the racial politics. So I think that tension point is really cool because it kind of challenges like the canon as it knows Black artists, and it's creating like more space to be in these mediums that we're not often represented in. And then I think as well with Anne being such a young artist, that just like the tension of her being a young woman, like just really, really so multifaceted in this in terms of how she jumps between mediums and maintains this integrity in her storytelling is really awesome. But also the way her work is challenging like the intellectualization of African art, because oftentimes it's really siloed into this place of being ritualistic or having just these connotations of like primitivism that are being perpetuated still. Is so it's really awesome to see that tension that she creates within her work of really pushing people to see that, oh, like there is this there's just as much conceptualization and thoughtfulness, and just compelling conversation that's happening around this type of work that is not about spirituality or the mundane and just the way we go about using objects on a daily basis. So I think, yeah, it's really cool to see how they both pose that duality and that hybridity in all of their work. I mean, I think that's what the future really is. At the end of the day, it's like the opportunity to take different paths, and I think being in that space in between is really where we birth new ideas. That's where innovation happens, and yeah, that's where the future happens, when where culture meets. So
That's where the future happens. I like it. Sorry, you're all caught up. Okay. I have one more comment from the book. which is from Chase Pendleton, one of our colleagues, wrote an essay as well, which is in at the end of the book. And she quotes L.P. Hartley, a novel called The Go-Between, sort of in-betweeners, where they say the past is a foreign country. They do things differently there. I feel like the future is a foreign country. And I feel like what Zinzi just said about sort of the future, we have to think right now about ourselves as creating the future every day. But that we also have to kind of remain calm. I was talking about this earlier, like we don't know what's going to happen in the future. We can think about it. I think it's really healthy to be ready for it and to imagine the future that we want, but also at the same time try to sort of be in this moment and enjoy what's happening now and reserve our energy for whatever we might need. So I would love to hear any, you look like you want to say something.
Makes me think of like people's obsession with space and like is like wanting to like be Mars and stuff. And I'm just like, but we're right here and like we're not doing enough to take care of where we are right now. Like, why are we putting so much like energy and like everything into these other spaces when like this is the space we inhabit and this is the space we need to be taking care of? It's just like any space thing always like gets me like I get so confused by it, but just a random thought.
Yeah. Well, it kind of removes our responsibility for taking care of this place if we think about that. And to bring it back a little bit, and I want everyone to be thinking of questions. And if you all have other topics you want to bring up, please do that. This is the end of our 50th anniversary year. Play Studio has been around for 50 years. We hope to be around far into the future. We are in this place, which is this beautiful new building that exists because we have a supportive community and that we want to support our community. And so, yeah, being grateful for kind of what we have right at this moment is super important. And I'm very grateful to be here with all of you. Does anyone have any questions or comments from the audience, or do any of you have other things you want to say? Yeah.
Thank you. Oh,
I don't know if I'll read.
not really, I don't know. I just want to thank you. I want to thank the artists for being so vulnerable, because I felt like it was a really personal presentation that everyone gave. And also those of you who chose the artists, I didn't know how it came about until now, but the diversity of the cultural backgrounds, and the different types of art, I feel like you really nailed it if that was your goal, because that's what I'm taking away from here. I'm really moved by it, and I'm also inspired. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes, you being moved and inspired was our goal. So thank you for saying that. Adam. Here, take this.
How has having the show in Philadelphia guided the conversation in the curation process? And do you think the process would be different had the show been in a different location, perhaps like on the West Coast or up in Canada, in somewhere different than Philly?
That's a great question. I'm going to let you all talk about it. I just want to say we decided one of the parameters was none of these artists have ever shown at the Clay Studio before. So,
But you picked the Philly.
but I have, yes, that's true. Cesar, I did choose, and he has been involved at the Clay Studio. But yes, you're right. I did do that. Well, I thought we had to have somebody from Philadelphia. She's very tied to California, right? Yeah, I think she's, yeah. Go ahead.
I think honestly, people do not realize that you could go anywhere in the world and you will run into somebody from Philly. Like it is inevitable. I have gone to so many places and ended up just standing next to a person from Philly. And I think one of the really cool things about this city is that it really is like the landing point for so much culture in America. I mean, we are like the genesis of what it means to kind of be American. And I think at the same time, we are so inclusive in a lot of ways, and thinking about, so much of the like political climate right now, it's really cool to know that there's a lot of places in the world where I, like in this climate, I don't even feel as comfortable anymore. And it, when I come back to Philly, I feel good. Like, even though obviously we know this is like Pennsylvania is a pretty conservative state, but like, I don't know. I feel like we have a bubble. We've created a community for ourselves. We're so interdependent. There is a different kind of care that exists here, and that kind of supports a lot of the work done in the cultural sector, because this work is hard. There's not enough resources a lot of times, and we're working with a lot of incredible people that are very talented. So just trying to continue to do that in a way that's sustainable is very challenging. And I think, spaces like Clay Studio and other organizations really support doing that work. So yeah, I think this is the perfect place to have done it. And I really can't imagine having done it anywhere else. So
I'm just going to add to that and say that I haven't spent that much time in Philly, but I just feel like it did need to happen in this space, in this building, with like the group of people that it happened with, and like with Jen leading and everybody who works here, who like take such great care to build the community. And I like the opening just felt different than openings that I've been to or have had in New York. It just like felt more like family oriented in a way. Like it just felt more like human than other openings I've been to. So I just feel like, I don't know, obviously it being in Philly informs this place, but to me it's just like it's that this was the home for this project.
There are certain places in the United States where there are native art markets. And so I do run into Chase, or I run into Holly, or, there are certain museums that have vast Native American art collections. So usually at those exhibitions, maybe I'll run into other artists. And so when I was thinking about artists to select, I was hoping that I would present artists that maybe they didn't know anything about the clay studio, and maybe the clay studio didn't know anything about them, and then there might be a relationship in the future. And so I was really hoping that for people of Philadelphia and the area, that maybe for them they'd be like, wow, I never knew about Chase Earls before, because maybe they had never been to Oklahoma recently, or maybe before, and the same with Holly Wilson, like maybe that as well. So that was kind of my hope, was that I really wanted to introduce people here to maybe artists from someplace else that they had no idea about.
Yes, and thank you for doing that, because it really worked. Yeah, Michelle. Thanks. Yeah, the craft traditions here are really important. And, those of us who live here, did you say we are like the best part of culture of the entire country?
We're the craft chicks.
We do.
We're not the rat chicks.
We're the craft chicks. I like it.
So
we do. Philadelphians do have a tendency to overblow our like, everything first was here. Trinity.
As someone who's able to
Zoom won't be able to hear you. Go ahead.
it's been amazing to have visitors come in and kind of think to themselves with each of the different artists that you chosen, but particularly visitors who have indigenous backgrounds, which, like you said, a lot of the time, certainly the climate of everyone wanting to have high levels of diversity without necessarily having emotional attachment to that. Kind of rough, because you get a one-off show and then someone thinks about it, is not able to make it, and then you never see artwork from an indigenous person. So I think feed off what you just said, it's been amazing to see people connect with at least one of the artists in the gallery and then be able to people that they might encounter. Yeah. Or so that's been amazing. I don't know if that would have been possible.
Thank you. Sorry, Zoom probably couldn't hear, but Trinity is our exhibition coordinator and has had a huge hand in making sure this exhibition came together well. Thank you, Trinity. Oh, good question. I feel like Adam might have an answer to his own question. Do you have an answer to your own question?
No, it's all you.
No questions online. Okay. Any other questions from the audience? Or, oh, one more. Yep.
On the huge global migration. Are you thinking about that? Because everybody was everyone in this exhibition, but it's going to increase. So.
Just in terms of like how it's already been increasing because we're in a global climate now. Yeah. I guess I don't know. Do you just basically, yeah, like we're all sort of moving between places. I think that's that idea of like the tension of being of many cultures at once, probably. Yeah. I think that's a good point. Exactly. Yeah.
So I'll take it in a bit of a different direction from what we've been talking about, and it's a conversation that Jennifer and I have talked about before. I don't know how involved you were with the didactic material, but what are your feelings of providing contextual information and how much you provide in opposition of just looking and absorbing the artwork and having an emotional reaction to the artwork versus providing context for it in the biography of the maker?
I really like text. That's all I have to say.
We weren't involved, I don't, in the didactics, but in general in my exhibitions, I do believe in having sort of like wall text that's more about sort of what generally is happening in the room, and then having either extended labels or bios or both for like the art. I think in a very romantic way, we think that people could look at art and they would, be able to connect and like feel something. And I think that still happens, but at the end of the day, you do need to read what the work is about most of the time to like really get it. So I think the text is important. And I actually think writing is like 50% of what curating is, or maybe a higher percentage. Like I think writing goes like very hand in hand with what curating is. And so, yeah, I'm never gonna give up on the text, even if people don't read it.
Yeah. No, I love text. And so I get frustrated when I do work for museums and they don't want any text. They just want the basic tombstone label. And for me, there's people do visitor studies all the time, tracking people in museums. And there are some people who read, some people that are the flybys that just like browse. And so I want to provide text in case you do want to read it. So I'm not saying that everybody will read everything, but maybe someone will see something across the room and say, oh, that reminds me of home. That reminds me of my auntie. That reminds me of something. And so I want the text to be there so that if you do have that kind of reaction, that I provide text there for you. And so that's why I'm always going to do it. And yeah, you don't have to read it, but like,
We did not have to gruel through the process of making labels or writing the labels. It was wonderful to write about this show. I think that's always a privilege. I just love writing about the artist and the work because I feel like I get carried away, and hopefully others get excited too when they get to read the catalog, because I love I love catalogs, zines, books, all of the above. But I also think, yeah, just when we like handed our essays over, you guys really took that material and just turned it into incredible labels and text. So that was really awesome to not have to do too much heavy lifting, but then see the work also translating over and having the accessibility of that element to the show. So yeah, it's very appreciated.
Yeah, you did write the labels. It's just that I pulled them from your essays, so you didn't have to do the extra work. Yeah, great. Inspire.
That's why high fashion is answer prices. You don't know, the people at the bottom, you don't know what person here, and I think having text and all that really creates art of the art.
Yeah, making everyone feel comfortable enough. Mm-hmm.
Like having the text is always for the artist to take with the viewers. Where it used one thing people that have said, I don't think people see it too much anymore, talk about how art should be for itself. And that's just the dumbest idea I've ever heard. Because we make art, but the art that is made kind of has this whole identity inside of the artist's head. But nobody's inside the artist's head. I don't think any artist wants anybody inside their head. We have to make the effort to connect with connect with people outside of ourselves and get outside of our head. I think I'm speaking because that's just the nature of my own creativity and my own creative process. But I think it applies to other artists too, because we all have this whole story. We have these stories about what we make and why we make it floating around in our heads, but it's our job as part of making the art to tell those stories. Because those stories have value, those stories have merit, and nobody's going to know them if you don't tell them.
Yeah, back to storytelling.
And I just wanted to say, and also the way that I look at putting stories on social media or having things virtually as well, so like a hybrid event of in person and online, and also it's because I think sometimes we also have to be honest that not everybody can come and visit. So there are many people that would love to come to Philadelphia to see the show, but maybe they cannot get here. And so I do think that that's also important to like have as much as you can online or available for people, because we just have to sometimes be honest and just kind of know that there are so many more people who would love to be here, but they can't be here in person.
And honestly, I'm just going to put this out here because I don't want to play devil's advocate, but there's many people who can't read. And there's a lot of people who can't understand, even like maybe they can read, but they still can't understand the language that we speak as patrons of the arts or people that work in the arts. So it's like you can go to a museum and you can read a label, and as soon as they start talking about canon this, form, line, shape, and a lot of people might not understand that. So I think text is incredible, but I also think we throw the word accessibility around and think, oh, it's virtual, it's accessible. Oh, there's an extended label, it's accessible. I think our goal should be, like, when you go in a gallery or a museum, that you talk to the security guard, that you talk to somebody else in the gallery, that you're not going to the gallery by yourself all the time. Should be a very democratic space. And I think originally that was the intention, in early civilization when we were creating these spaces to engage with art. But yeah, I think we're getting further away from that. So I just do want to note that, because yeah, accessibility is one thing, but some people can't make it in, and some people like, education is just one of those things that is super multifaceted as well. And all types of education and backgrounds deserve the respect and the opportunity to still engage with the work, even if they can understand what's on the wall or not. We just need human connectivity and care at the end of the day. So
Absolutely. And next fall's exhibition is called Clay as Care. That's my segue.
see you guys then.
See you next year. Does anyone else have anything? Or I don't think there's anything online, and I think we are pretty much at our time. So although the day had some flexible timing, we're finishing up when we said we would.
Yeah.
I want to thank all of you again for being part of the team. It was really special for me. Thanks to all of you. Thank you to those of you in Zoom land. It really means so much that so many people have chosen to spend their whole day with us today thinking about art. Have a good night. See you in the future.